is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Unspoiled, the book club, covering Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. In this episode, I get to read a delightful story in the exact style that I love, right around Christmas time, and I am very happy about it. Welcome to Unspoiled. All right, welcome to this show, everyone. I am Natasha.
I'm Candace.
And forgive me, guys, if you hear a weird whistling sound when I inhale. I am getting over a cold. I'm finally at the tail end of it, I think. But there's that weird, that sound when you inhale, when your lungs are kind of fighting for their lives. And I'm worried that my mic is picking up on that. So, sorry. Me and Candace recorded this episode once already, but due to some problems that I should have helped figure out and did not because I did not think of it, we are having to re-record it. Now, normally re-recording bums me out, but I'm actually kind of glad we're re-recording this one because I really liked this book and I feel like we didn't really do it justice the first time around. So
it was pretty late.
Candace dibbed this book as soon as she saw that I was going to be covering it, but she had never read the book, which is a very rare thing for somebody to dib one that they haven't read. She had seen the movie, which is a very, very popular anime movie. Would you call it anime?
I think it's anime.
And then when she began reading was a little bit surprised to discover that the book is nothing like the movie.
I was perturbed.
Perturbed. Which is kind of funny because once we got through the first recording, it seemed like there were parts of the book that you really did like more than the movie. But you were so preoccupied with expecting the book to be like the movie that you were irritated purely because it deviated rather than because of the content. Does that sound accurate?
That's an accurate statement. I was hoping the movie, and I said this the first time, but the movie has plot holes that are so wide you could drive a truck through them. And I ignored all of that because I'm just really familiar with Miyazaki's work, and there are certain things that he super likes. And I just kind of decided to, and also it's anime, so there's some really weird things in there. And so I thought that the book was going to fill in all of that stuff for me. And that did not happen because the movie just made it up. Not only were those things not explained, but I just didn't know. And maybe 3/4 of the way through the book, maybe it was halfway, it doesn't matter. I read a blog post written by somebody who compared the major differences between the book and the film. And then I really wish that I had read that in advance, but I just didn't know. And it really cleared up a lot of things for me, and I was able to let go of some of my expectations. And it really made the book better at that point.
Okay, awesome. So for those of you who are wondering from the intro when I say, in the exact style I like, I am just so here for, British children's literature. And it was what I was brought up on, and really, I started to talk in the style that these children talk in these books without quite understanding how pretentious it sounded, because I didn't realize that this wasn't a thing that everyone was reading. So there were moments in school where I would start to say something and then kind of had to stop and be like, oh dear, that sounds crazy when I say it out loud. It's how I think, but I can't talk that way. And And one of the major ones, of course, is the Chronicles of Narnia, but there's also books like The Secret Garden and Little Princess, or The Enchanted Castle, which I just got a hold of a copy by E. Nesbit, and she also wrote Five Children and It. The Princess and the Goblin, I think, is another one by somebody MacDonald. But there's like a lot of British children's literature that is they're considered classics now, and that was pretty much all I read as a kid. So the feel of this book when I started it just really like zeroed in on exactly my sweet spot. And because it's the holiday season and you want things that are like comforting and familiar around this time of year in a lot of ways, it was just felt so perfect. And I flew through this. It was an audiobook and it was 8 hours long. And I almost got through the whole thing in one day. I did a lot of cooking that day, which is part of it also. So I want to read the first like couple of paragraphs to give you all an idea, because I feel like really what this whole book is about in a lot of ways is subverting expectations, and not even necessarily expectations of the reader, although that is a factor. It's more like the book is functioning in a world where things obey the laws of fairy tales. And so the plot goes out of its way to let us know how much all of the characters expect their lives to work like a fairy tale. And then the plot does not actually work out that way. So the opening paragraph: in the land of Ingary, where such things as 7-league boots and cloaks of invisibility really exist, it is quite a misfortune to be born the eldest of 3. Everyone knows you are the one who will fail first and worst if the 3 of you set out to seek your fortunes. Sophie Hatter was the eldest of 3 sisters. She was not even the child of a poor woodcutter, which might have given her some chance of success. Her parents were well-to-do and kept a lady's hat shop in the prosperous town of Market Chipping. True, her own mother died when Sophie was 2 years old and her sister Letty was 1 year old, and their father married his youngest shop assistant, a pretty blonde girl called Fanny. This ought to have made Sophie and Letty into ugly sisters, but in fact all 3 girls grew up very pretty indeed, though Letty was the one everyone said was the most beautiful. Fanny treated all 3 girls with the same kindness and did not favor Martha in the least. So right there, you have it set up that Sophie believes, as the eldest of 3 sisters, that she's destined for like the most boring failure of a life. She just accepts that without question. And there's an almost like note of surprise that because her father got remarried and had a stepdaughter, that Sophie and her sister Letty don't immediately turn into horrible, ugly stepsisters, and that Fanny isn't evil to them because they're not her daughters. I just really like that opening because I feel like she's kind of making fun of the characters, but also maybe the reader for what they might be thinking this is going to be.
Well, she's certainly making fun of me because I didn't catch on to any, like, I had a really hard time with the way Sophie was describing these expectations for siblings, because it's not typical. You know, like the oldest is the one who has all these expectations and burden and family and all this stuff. And that's just not the case. And this is, if I hadn't known that the author was British, I would have guessed anyway, because there are several parts of this that I really don't think an American author writing for an American audience could get away with. What's
that?
Well, the town is called Market Chipping.
Right.
What the fuck?
Listen, there are some fucking weird-ass town names.
I know that, but these are not weird words. They're just words that are put together, and that's what makes it weird.
But that's what I mean, is that there are weird town names because they're things that are, they're like 2 words put together that you're just kind of like, really? Like, there's a town here in Texas called Flower Mound.
Okay. I live so close to Flower Mound.
You know, Flower Mound. And somebody was like, that's a great town name. Sure.
It's, you know what? There are no mounds with flowers in Flower Mound. Like a Walmart and it's been a long time since I've been out there, but it's gotten really snooty lately. So maybe they all, I don't know. I was I'll make like a weird sex joke, but it was going to fall flat. So just know that it sounded good in my head.
Okay, so listen to this because I just found a list of the 10 rudest place names in the UK. So, top 10. Bell End, Worcestershire.
Why?
Brown Willie, Cornwall.
Why are people like this?
Boggy Bottom, Hertfordshire. Twat in Orkney.
I hate it.
Knob End in South Lancashire. Fanny Barks in Durham. Scratchy Bottom in Dorset. Minge Lane in Worcestershire. Again, Worcestershire. Dixmount in Suffolk. Crotch Crescent in Oxford. Oh, goody.
What didn't somebody call, what's her name in the book? Jon Snow's lover. God damn it. What's her name? The lady who, the red hair girl.
Oh, Ygritte.
Yeah. Did somebody in that book call her a Scarlet Minge or something
Ginger
like
Minge.
that? Ginger Minge. Yeah. God, I'm never going to forget that.
Yep.
But also like Fanny. I think we talked about this last.
Yeah. Fanny, for those who are not in the know of British slang, is slang for it's basically the pussy of England.
I honestly cannot decide if this is Margaret Wynne-Jones being snide about Sophie's dad marrying the young pussy or not.
I doubt it.
And I just some of these names just are so weird. Like Sophie, she makes hats. Her last name is Hatter. And this bitch's name is Fanny. And I'm just like, is this a joke about her weird dad marrying a young lady? Like I just don't know.
Yeah, it's an like shockingly common name too, which is one of those things that I just don't understand why, if it's a really common slang, it would also be a common name. But there it is.
I got on market shipping for a really long time.
I'm looking at some of these other town names. These are just weird ones. Upton Snodsbury, Pucklechurch, Curry Mallet, Plumpton, Lickfold. Ooh. Matching Tie, Netherwallop, Patching, Climping, Crudwell, Puddleton. Oh my God, these are crazy. Mudford Sock.
And yet Americans are the ones that speak bastard English. Okay.
Oh my God, it's called Wet Wang in Yorkshire.
Y'all have a town named Vagina Wood, and we are the ones who speak about
Great Snoring in Norfolk. Okay, see? Yeah, market shipping's just fine. I'm fine with it. So the way the story begins is that Mr. Hadding, Sophie's father, dies, and it comes to Fanny's attention that they cannot afford to be sending the girls to these good schools that they've been going to.
Not only did her dad marry a super young girl, but he's terrible with money.
Mm-hmm.
And this girl has to take over the whole family.
Yeah.
And I just was so grateful that she was smart and capable and not a terrible stepmother.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's Martha, which is kind of amazing because Martha is Fanny's actual daughter.
She's a brat.
Martha is the one that plants it in Sophie's head that Fanny is exploiting her and that she sent Letty off on purpose because she's jealous. All these things that really do feel like, fairy tale tropes. But she winds up finding places for Martha and Letty to work. And she sends Martha to work with a witch, which it's thrown into this story in such a way that you're like, wait, what? But apparently in this universe, witches and, somebody like the wizard Howl, they just provide a service, almost like an apothecary, that people can go and purchase from. And it's not unusual.
Once I read this, I was really surprised that this is left out of the film, because it really seems like something that he would have liked to have in there, because it's existent in his other movies. So I feel like that would have added something to it. But in the movie, Sophie only has one sister, and it's Letty.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We don't even like meet Fanny except for once, and she does a bad thing. So. Oh,
okay. So she's a little flatter.
Well, to be honest, what they did is they combined what Miss Angorian did. Some of the whole thing where she like touches the guitar, and that's kind of they had Fanny do something similar to that, but in the movie Fanny's not even the same character, so I'm not really offended by it.
Huh, okay. So Sophie, meanwhile, is kept in the shop. She's a really, really good seamstress, and she's doing like these clothes that look like they come from expensive shops, and she starts to become so, what's the word I'm looking for? Despondent, I guess, that she begins to just talk to the hats that she's making.
She talks to them, and she does work that nobody asked her to do.
Right.
Which I'm sure, like, when she starts doing that, and when Martha plants it in her head, hey, Mom is exploiting you, and Sophie's like, well, I do sit in my room all night and talk to the hats, so that must be Fanny's fault.
And she's just like, she says to, she flattered the hats a bit, because you should flatter customers. You have mysterious allure, she told one that was all veiling with hidden twinkles. To a wide, creamy hat with roses under the brim, she said, you are going to have to marry money. And to a caterpillar green straw with a curly green feather, she said, you are young as a spring leaf. She told pink bonnets they had dimpled charm, and smart hats trimmed with velvet that they were witty. She told the mushroom-pleated bonnet, you have a heart of gold, and someone in a high position will see it and fall in love with you. This was because she was sorry for that particular bonnet. It looked so fussy and plain. So, later on, a certain woman comes sweeping into her shop and looks at all the hats and begins to repeat back the things that she said to these hats with no knowledge, like she wasn't there, and yet she's practically word for word saying, marry money, oh, mysterious allure, heart of gold, well, yes, yes, yes.
Sophie doesn't pick up on any of that, though.
She does not. She's too distracted because the woman standing in her shop is the Witch of the Waste, and she is a very imposing person. So Candace is a big fan of the Witch of the Waste.
I love the Witch of the Waste, this lady. Nothing this woman did, no matter how objectively weird and terrible things that she did are, I get it. She's mad and she's jilted and she deserves to be angry.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I mean, I probably would not, do a Build-A-Bear with some dudes in my basement, but, everybody needs a hobby, I guess.
I think with her, what it is for me is that she was clearly kind of fucked up before anything with Howl even happened.
I agree. She does say to the king at some point, or she says to somebody about the king that she had a beef with his grandfather too. So she just has she's the Taylor Swift of this world, only she's more evil.
Oh my God. That's the worst comparison.
No, it's a good comparison.
Well, this remains to be seen.
Okay.
So the woman turns to Sophie and is like, I'm not putting up with your fucking competition anymore. And Sophie is like, what? Wait, what are you talking about? And then the woman raises her hand and does something, and Sophie feels her face do something strange. The woman leaves, and Sophie looks in the mirror, and she is an old woman of at least 90 years old. And it's kind of a remarkable reaction because she looks in the mirror and she isn't even that mad initially. She's just like, yeah, now I look more on the outside like I feel on the inside. Which is really like just the saddest statement ever. Basically, I knew that my life was going to be dull, so I guess we can just skip ahead to the part where I die. Is kind of what it feels like she's saying.
Sophie is she just doesn't have a lot of connection to any of the things that she does. There's nothing really wrong with her life. She's very good at what she does. Everybody likes her hats. Her hats have caused other people to have very good things happen to them, like that Jane Ferrier chick who bought the one hat and then met, what was it, like a count or something? And she marries him, and then other people want the same hat because they think that, you know, the hat is just doing that.
Right.
And it was the hat doing that. And also the mayor's wife bought one of those caterpillar hats, and those became very popular. And she's just for having such a great amount of influence on the things around her, because that's her magic power that she doesn't know about, she manages to make her own life so miserable.
Yeah, she does.
And she's doing that. Like, I came to the conclusion after finishing the book that the reason that Fanny did not start giving Sophie a salary after she asked about it, after Martha told her that you're being exploited, she didn't give Sophie a salary because Sophie didn't think she was going to get one.
Yeah.
So she made that happen because she influences things. She enchants things. So there was no reason for Fanny to do that because Sophie didn't think she was going to do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
She's just one of those people who just accepts things being shitty. And instead of that being normal and the way a lot of people are, it just perpetuates this shittiness.
Yeah, this is actually, I feel like, a really great metaphor for just how a lot of us live our lives, because the number of people I have talked to who just decide that things are the way they are and that's all there is to it, and they don't put in the slightest effort to fix things without seeming to realize that everything they do influences what is happening anyway.
I mean, I do this. Like when I get depressed, I just stop cleaning the house. Like I just want to see how.
Yeah, but there's a difference between being depressed and that just being how you see the world, period.
She continues to make the mess worse for herself. She's not happy in her job, so she starts taking hats home because she thinks that that's something that she should be doing because she's miserable doing it at work. So why not just go ahead and be miserable at home too?
I just think that it's a really, like, because people behave as if I don't change anything, that's me going with, like, fate. And that's not actually true. If you don't change anything, you are making the choice to not change anything. People, like, don't seem to realize that not making a choice or taking action is a choice and is taking action. And that's something that I feel like she is really struggling with in this, Sophie. It's just that she acts as if I'm just accepting my lot as the eldest sister and that this is going to be, you know, my life is going to be dull and be garbage. And she doesn't realize that accepting it is actually what's causing it all to happen. She thinks that this is just fate and that fate is going to continue to, like, plug along without her and she can just hang on for the ride. But fate needs her to make it happen. Does that make sense?
In Sophie's case, yes, it does. I'm not really sure that my comparison to, you know, my own depression is very good because in this case, Sophie is quite literally magically perpetuating her own misery.
Yeah, well, that's why I was saying, because like depression, I feel like is a very specific type of case. But I have definitely known people and have some people that are very close to me that I've had to yell at a couple times who really do have this sort of fatalist attitude. And I'm like, you know that you can do something. You really can. And it's sort of a combination of, I think, Diana Wynne Jones commenting on that sort of attitude in life and also what we expect because of fairy tales. So Sophie gets turned old. And part of the spell is that she's not allowed to tell anybody she's under a spell. So she decides that she's not going to go home because nobody's going to recognize her and she won't be able to explain.
She just assumes all of these things that are not true.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that her belief that because she can't talk about it, well, I can't talk about it. I might as well just pack a bag with some bread and cheese like every other animated character ever does.
Right.
And leave. Because bread and cheese is such a...
Always bread and cheese.
Always the bread and cheese. And she just leaves. Like, I think in the movie she sticks around for another day and she leaves, but nobody recognizes her because she's old.
Mm-hmm.
I guess they changed that for the film. But she just leaves. No note. She just fucking leaves.
And it's kind of remarkable that she isn't more, like, doesn't have any faith at all that people won't figure out what's going on, not just by recognizing her, but like this is a world where spells are a thing, where you go and study, like you intern with a witch for the summer. Like this is not completely out of the realm. It would be much more understandable in our universe where this isn't something that we know that can happen.
It's also particularly offensive because she like knew almost right away that there was something not right with Letty when she went to go visit her. And it wasn't Letty, it was Martha.
Right.
So she didn't believe that her own family would have the same even base level intuition that she did.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. Because she goes to see Letty, and it turns out that Martha, while interning with the witch, immediately learned how to swap appearances. And she and Letty changed places, and now Letty is the one that's working with the witch because she's the really smart one. And Martha is working at the bakery because she wants to have a passel of children, and she needs to get started early, so she really needs to meet a husband pronto.
And this is something also that Sophie just did not pick up on. Her sisters didn't like the way that Fanny had, directed them to go. So they switched, like they fixed it. Fanny is not even offended by this at all. She's just like, oh, well, good for you. But she just misses all of these major things that were set up by her meeting with Martha that she thought was Letty.
Yep.
She just doesn't pick up on any of this stuff. And I didn't ask you this before, but I'm curious now. Did you understand the spell when Martha was explaining it? Because I thought that they had switched bodies at first.
Oh, just that they switched. Yeah, because she says
Martha,
that it's slowly going to fade and she'll start to look more and more like herself.
I did not understand what she meant. I just was really confused by that. And I didn't get it right away. And I think my brain just rejected it, and I didn't understand it until the end.
Yeah, it's kind of genius actually in that she has the glamour, so to speak, slowly fade so that the person who has like chosen her won't really notice that she doesn't look like she did initially. And it's kind of brilliant in that, like, it's sort of like when you like start dating someone and then you slowly start to put on weight and they don't notice and you don't notice, but you see a picture of yourself from when you first started dating and you're like, oh God. Yeah.
Well, some people on Reddit notice.
Oh, well, there's that.
There are lots of posts. My girlfriend or boyfriend has let herself go. Well, how much weight did she gain? I don't know, 10 pounds.
Oh my God. But it's
also, I think that whole thing where she talks about, well, eventually I'll just start to be more like me. Sophie doesn't pick up on that either. And this is all, like, to me personally, now that we're doing this again, this is foreshadowing.
Doesn't pick, what do you mean she doesn't pick, like, what are you, I'm not sure what you're saying.
The whole thing hinges on recognition and you being who you are, no matter what you look like. People recognize Sophie even when she's old. Like, right. Immediately. Fanny notices it. Letty notices it without even having, like, a full glance. Like, she notices it from the orchard.
Right.
And this whole, like, conversation about them slowly turning back into themselves. And, like, I just feel like this whole thing is just part of Sophie looking different.
Okay. That makes sense. Well, the main thing that I was like thinking about when it comes to Martha looking like Letty is that it might be imperceptible and they will still be very happy with her, because it's said that like they're all beautiful. Letty's the most beautiful, but that they are all pretty. But what happens when like her husband meets her sister?
Well, he's just an idiot man. So
he's just going to be like, wait.
He's just glad that he nailed down one of those Hatter sisters.
That's fair.
That's how I took that.
So Sophie goes off and to find her fortune, and is caught outside in the night, like cold and exhausted, realizing that as an old woman, she's not going to be able to like physically do some of the things that she had been able to do, and won't be able to handle certain things anymore, and is trying to think of how she's going to get somewhere safe, when all of a sudden the castle comes just clomping over the hill.
It starts to occur to her that maybe she shouldn't have just left home.
Fucking left. And she winds up climbing up onto this castle and demanding that they let her in. And Howl's assistant, Michael, opens the door and lets her inside, and she just pushes right past him and sits down on a very comfy chair by the fire. And basically is like, okay, I live here now. I kind of loved the way that she did this, because it sort of feels like what happened is Sophie decided her life was nothing. I'm the eldest of 3. I'm a failure, whatever. Then she got turned old, and she was suddenly like, oh, I don't have to worry about any of those expectations anymore. It doesn't matter. Now I'm old. And it completely freed her to do whatever the fuck she felt like. Which is exactly what she begins to do, is just whatever she feels like at any given moment.
People accept that. Nobody kicks her out of the castle.
Yep.
She's able to handle Calcifer, which is kind of a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Michael is just, he's like 15-year-old boy. He's
a child.
Yeah, he was never gonna be the obstacle.
And for those of you who don't know, Calcifer is a fire demon that lives in the fireplace.
Calcifer, he was a falling star.
Calcifer is my jam. I love him the most. He's my favorite character, probably.
I know you said you didn't like it when I told you before, but in the movie, he's done by Billy Crystal, and I really do love it. I really think that when you watch the movie, you'll be less bothered by Billy Crystal, and you'll be spending the entire movie wondering why the hell Howl has a bird form.
A bird form?
Yeah, he's got like feathers and shit.
Why?
Because there's a war going on that he has to fight in another region.
I hate this movie already. Ugh, get out.
You'll like it. Just watch it.
Nah, you're not doing a lot to recommend it to me. So Calcifer is bound to the hearth because of a contract between him and Howl. And basically, Howl has given him something in exchange for Calcifer powering a lot of Howl's magic and powering the castle and whatnot. And he makes a deal because as soon as Sophie walks in, he's like, oh, you're under a spell. And she's like, what? Yes, how did you know that? And he's like, well, I can see it on you, but it's a really complicated spell with a lot of layers. And I can take it off you, but it's going to be a long time before I figure out what the spell is so that I can undo it. And I'll make a deal that if you break my contract with Howl, I will break the spell that's on you.
This whole thing comes off as a little shady at first, but it really isn't.
I really, like, when she's, like, making deals with demons right out the gate, I was like, what are you doing, Sophie? But it turns out to be fine.
It turns out to be a good thing because Calcifer is the type of character who has a lot of knowledge, but doesn't feel the need to impart that to anyone else unless it's extremely necessary. He says at the end, doesn't he, that he could tell that Sophie's enchantment was because of the Witch of the Waste.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure that Howl knew that as well. But he didn't do anything because he could see that she was the one that was ultimately powering it herself. But we learn later that Howl was actually a super proficient wizard before he made a deal with Calcifer.
Mm-hmm.
So with Calcifer, I mean, this guy is, he's prolific, if that's the right word. He's extreme.
Extreme is certainly the word. Dramatic.
Every sense of the word.
Yep.
Not that Howl was dramatic in any way.
Oh my God.
We won't go that far. But he's extremely powerful. And it's a lot of magic to move this castle, and it exhausts even Calcifer when he has to move the castle around.
Right. Especially when he has to move it quickly. There's a point where he almost goes out.
But it just comes off as really shady at first, but then we learn later why Calcifer wants to break his contract, and it's not because he's trying to fuck Howl over, but he doesn't want to fuck Howl over, which is the whole point. I didn't realize that until it was happening.
And part of it that surprised me is that it turns out Howl wanted out of the contract also. But he isn't, like, part of the contract. It's the same as with the Witch of the Waste. They can't talk about what the contract is with anyone who doesn't already know about it.
Nope. One loophole is Calcifer. He can talk about it, except he can only talk about it when somebody else knows things.
Right. So he's trying to drop hints to Sophie to figure everything out. And she, like, as much as one would think that the main thrust of the rest of the story would be Sophie trying to discover the ins and outs of this contract so she can get the spell taken off her, it really isn't a priority for her. Sophie is incredibly okay with being an old woman, except for the shortening of her overall lifespan. That's the bummer for her. But she has no vanity about wishing she looked young again. She had no particular goals that she wishes she could have completed before this happened to her. And she makes the deal with Calcifer and is staying in the house and is in the position where she could get this done, but it's not something that takes up any amount of her time. She's not investigating anything really, except like investigating in the loosest of terms, wherein it's really just her being a busybody, as Howl points out a couple times.
Only a couple?
He calls her Miss Nose.
I just can't get over how quickly Sophie is willing to make a deal with an unknown entity like Calcifer. Oh, hey, look! A demon that lives in a fireplace that moves a castle that literally everybody in this city is terrified of.
Right.
Because they think Howl is consuming human bodies. And it's cool. Let's make a deal. It's fine. She didn't think about it at all.
Yeah, it's kind of like...
kind of OG, man.
Yeah, I really enjoy the fact that it's more like it's not actually true, but because we are there and we see it when it's happening and we can sort of hear Sophie's thoughts here. But I want to make it like she just made that deal so that she could get in the house. And I know that's not actually really what it is, because at the moment she's making the deal, she's like, "Oh, well, that would be really good." But then I think she almost catches herself by surprise with how unbothered she is that she's an old woman.
She wants to know what's up with Howl. Like, she literally thinks
true.
That he is eating the innards of girls.
Yeah. And
she's looking for him. What was it that you said last time? Bits of girl?
Bits of girl. Yep.
So maybe she's looking for like a medal from the mayor. She's curious about Howl because she's been hearing rumors about him and the Witch of the Waste for months.
This was something that I had really wanted to, mention, because I did last time, is that Howl is nothing like what I expected. I thought he was going to be... I thought he might be kind of a Dumbledore type, even though I know he's younger, because of the illustrations that I've seen of the cover and stills from the film. I knew he would be younger, but I thought that he might be like an immortal, maybe? And that he just looked younger. You know what I mean?
Would be extremely exasperated.
Oh my God, completely.
With Howl. And I can't even just imagine McGonagall coming into contact with Howl. She would just be completely just...
I mean, Howl is basically... He is Gilderoy Lockhart. But
that's an insult to Howl.
But he's not trying. He's doing the opposite of what Gilderoy Lockhart's doing. Lockhart lied and said that he did all of these amazing things and took credit for them when he hadn't. Howl is doing the opposite, where he does amazing things and wants nobody to know about them and makes sure to spread around a bad reputation for himself because he's actively trying to shirk responsibility because he's a really good wizard and he is sick and tired of people trying to get him to do work for them.
Howl is that employee who works at a store that the manager keeps offering them the keys and the alarm code. And he's like, no, what? Buttons? I don't know how to work locks. What?
Right.
He doesn't, because you know that the minute they give you that shit, you're going to be closing every day. He doesn't want to do the work, even though he's already doing it. He's already doing what the king wants him to do. He's just doing it on the sly because he has to be sly because he knows the witch better than the king.
Yeah, the combination, he is not only just uninterested in responsibility, he's super, super vain, and like all of the spells that they keep in the house are basically meant for his skin and hair. And he also is the biggest drama queen you've ever seen and says things like, I shall go to my room now where I may die, and is dead serious about it. And just overall is like the castle is a perfect metaphor for who he is because he is afraid of commitment and responsibility. So he literally has a house that will not sit still. Like,
yep.
He is a man who goes and seduces women, tries to get them to fall in love with him, and as soon as they do, he loses interest. So he has the ultimate getaway vehicle, his entire home. He's like...
His house like opens up to like 3 different cities.
Yep.
And like he's got different names in each one, and he has Michael like spreading untrue, things about him all the time because he just doesn't want to be bothered with. He just wants to chase tail and look pretty all the time, and that's all he cares about. And I like Howl. I like him a lot.
Yeah, I mean, he's likable. That's what's so frustrating about him, I think. You said that he is voiced by Christian Bale in the movies?
Yeah, it fits in the movie.
Well, I was actually thinking that's not that, like, Christian Bale plays Laurie in the Little Women movie that Winona, what's-her-face, Ryder is in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Laurie is kind of a similar guy in a lot of ways. Like, he's a lot of fun, and he's a good dude, like, in a, like, deep in his heart sort of way. But he's also spoiled and really irresponsible and, like, kind of a brat. And so for him to play both of them, it doesn't feel that far off to me. I could see that.
He's very kind, and he does good things, but he doesn't want anybody to know that he's doing them because it would wreck his image.
Right. Yeah.
He likes the thrill of making a woman fall in love with him, but if they knew that he was so like proficient at his job and doing all of the things that he's doing, he wouldn't have that opportunity he wouldn't have that power.
Mm-hmm.
And they would flock to him instead of him having to chase them.
Right.
And that would ruin his game.
Right. Yeah, and he uses the word game, which he's in the middle of, like, lamenting this girl that isn't in love with him, and Sophie's feeling all kinds of sympathy for him. And then when he says something about how she's seeing this other fellow, and they usually get rid of the other fellow as soon as I'm around, her sympathy sharply declines. Then he calls it a game, and her sympathy declines even further. And then he says the name Letty, and she completely is just like, what?
Sophie really made this whole thing convoluted, and she didn't need to.
Yes.
Also, keep in mind that the movie was made in the 80s, so Christian Bale in the movies is not really
Batman Christian Bale.
I hate those movies so much. But no, he's not the gravelly guy who, kills hookers in his bedroom like in American Psycho. It's much more lighter than that.
Okay. So to make a long story short, the Witch of the Waste was in a relationship, and I use that term very loosely,
Yeah,
with
sure.
Howl at one point.
Yep.
And he jilted her, and she is pissed.
He jilted her ugly. I feel like he probably ghosted her.
Oh, yeah. That's his, I mean, he has a moving house, as we've said.
He probably didn't even give her the courtesy of a breakup text.
Yep.
This bitch ghosted her.
Yeah, and he's doing it in that way where you can see the red receipts, so you know he's getting them.
He left her on red for months. And I want to point out, because this is my favorite part of the movie, the Witch of the Waste is voiced by Lauren Bacall, who is now dead, and she looks completely different in the movie, by the way, because it's an anime, and anime is outrageous. But there is nobody better that could have done that.
Okay.
Lauren Bacall she's pretty amazing.
So it turns out she's not just gonna get revenge, and humiliate him or God knows what. The Witch of the Waste, there's this weird subplot that does not feel important at all throughout the book, that the king's brother disappeared.
Yeah, it's kind of like this back burner thing that Howl is doing.
That he's avoiding doing.
He says he's avoiding it. He wants Sophie, when he gets a royal summons, because one of his doors leads to, what is it, Kingsford, whatever, King something, the royal city. And the guards come and they give him this long, how long did Sophie say this went on? This went on for quite a while. The king, he wants boots for his soldiers, and he wants Howl to come to the palace. And Howl just knows that this means that the king is going to want him to search for his brother. Because his brother has gone missing because the Witch of the Waste threatened his daughter.
Right.
And so Justin, the prince, is like, okay, I'm going to go and ice this lady. And he disappears. And this is after, is this before or after that other wizard goes missing?
I think it's after, isn't it?
It kind of happens, it all happens before the story starts, because Sophie hears, rumors about it when she's working in the hat shop. But this other wizard, Suleiman, is allegedly dead, and Justin goes missing, and it's this big thing because the witch has threatened the princess.
Right.
Who is a toddler.
Yes. He offers to marry her. And
she makes that demand that she goes to the king instead of Howl, because Howl wants her to go and pretend to be his mother and tell him that he's a lazy piece of shit and he's not going to do it. Mm-hmm. And she leaves, and she has the weird contact with the witch. And anyway, it gets really convoluted. She goes back to the palace, and she says, Howl says he'll do it, but you got to marry him off to your daughter. And this, I think, is what gives Sophie away, is not really being who she says. And the king's like, yeah, my daughter's like a toddler. She's in diapers. It's not going to happen.
I love that whole scene, too, where she's just like, he wants me to do this whole thing because it comes down to he doesn't want to do it, and he's too much of a coward to come here and just tell you no, he doesn't want to do it. So he has this elaborate plan to convince you that he's incompetent, basically. And all of that just serves to make the king go, oh, he's exactly the man for the job. So that whole thing is going on in the background. And the wizard, what's the wizard's name again? Suleiman disappears also?
Yeah, he's Sullivan in Wales. And Suleiman, because I guess everybody gets a fancy name in the world of, I want to say Inverness, but I know that's not true. Ingri.
Yeah, it's what it turns out is that they disappeared because the Witch of the Waste is taking them apart. She kidnapped them, took pieces off of them. The pieces of them are still alive, separately, and is planning to put them together to create the perfect man with Howl's head as the top.
This is her revenge that she's serving cold and a little crazy.
Yep.
It's not just about Howl. This is about her punishing the royal family because some guy jilted her before. She has had enough of these men.
Yep.
to just fuck her around. So she's going to take Howl, her most recent, jilt, and she's going to put his head on this, like, Silence of the Lambs body and boss him around. And somehow, like, she's going to be queen too. Like, I don't think she thought this whole thing through very far, but that's what she wants to do. And I just think that that's
right.
You do you, girl.
Yeah, she's and there's like this weird thing with this scarecrow that has a turnip for a head, that on the way to Howl's castle, Sophie like bumps into it. She says some words to it, and before she's realized that she's got magic, brings it to life. And it is alive already, but it just had exhausted itself because it is the body of the wizard, I think, right? That's missing its head. I don't even remember. Maybe it's the prince's brother.
The prince's brother is dressed in the royal green stuff.
Oh,
so
okay.
The Witch of the Waste wants to use his body, I think, or something.
Whatever it is it's like this scarecrow keeps coming around and terrifying Sophie, and she doesn't realize that it's a person.
These things are all connected, and Sophie just doesn't. She doesn't even know the dots are there, so
right.
She can't connect them. But she's terrified of the scarecrow, but she lets in the dog. The dog is also another guy, because Suleiman turns out to be ugly.
Yes.
And the skull that she keeps seeing that she doesn't like is actually like, is it the wizard's skull or something?
I think it is, yeah.
Like all this stuff, and Howl has procured this skull, and the whole thing is just really kind of weird. But yeah, she's the Witch of the Waste. She's just got bits like popping all over the place. She doesn't handle her loose ends very well.
Yeah, it is a really like. I like the way that everything came together at the end, but I wish that I had known that any of this was going on. I also like the surprise, though, so I don't know. I have mixed feelings on it. And it felt like it came together, but really quickly. Like, by the time this started to come out as a plot point, there was only half an hour left in the audiobook. You know what I mean?
That it comes across as happening really quickly because we're reading this from Sophie's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And she doesn't know any of this is happening. But I think, like, if you were to reread it, it would be a different story.
Yeah.
Because I found a lot of her parts to be just kind of frustratingly tedious, because I felt like I was missing something. I thought, this can't be it. Like, there has to be something else going on. And there was. We just didn't know about it until the end. And I feel like it's a trick that Margaret Wynne Jones just wants us to reread her book.
Yeah, I don't know. I see what you mean. Like, I found the tedium to be kind of charming.
It's
mostly
whimsical, but it doesn't advance the plot.
But I think that, like, that was what I found charming, was that I thought I knew what the story was going to be about. I thought the whole thing was going to be her trying to find a way out. And then it turns out to just be a lot of like a day in the life of living with Howl and being a nosy old Betty. And I just didn't expect that to be, so I kind of enjoyed it more because I kept thinking, oh, this is going to be like, oh, gotta find out how the contract works, yada, yada, yada kind of thing. And it wasn't at all, which I found to be almost refreshing. So I get what you're saying, and yet it sort of worked for me because of that same thing, you know?
I liked it in the end because Howl didn't, like, he knew all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he already understood how Sophie's, curse or whatever. Like, he already understood it.
Yeah.
The movie, like, I think that this is one of the things that the movie actually did better. And I don't know if I explained it very well the last time we tried to record this, but in the movie, Sophie is old. But there are a few times where she kind of reverts to her other self.
Right.
But she doesn't realize that this is happening. But Howl realizes it. Like when she goes to the castle, like I said, the plot is different in the movie, but when she goes to the castle and she doesn't try and disparage Howl. Instead, the person she meets with, who's not even existing in the book, but the person she meets with is like disparaging Howl, and she gets angry and she starts to defend him and say, no, like he's actually really good and he's trying to help your dumb war. And she turns back into herself. Only with the gray hair. And that's when Howl makes an appearance. And then when he shows her the flowers, the meadow with all the...
Oh, right. Okay.
In the movie, he creates that for her. And it has nothing to do with a flower shop because it doesn't happen in the movie. But he creates this place for her because it's his secret place. And he wants to share it with her, and he fills it with flowers for her because he knows that she likes them. And as he's touring it with her, and he's showing her all of this stuff, and he says it resembles the place where he was a child. And she's just enjoying it so much, she turns back into herself. And he sees that, and he's trying to, encourage her to like loosen up on this firm grip she has on her bleak existence, so that she can stop being this old woman, because he knows that she's the one doing it to herself. And then as soon as Michael shows up, she turns back into an old lady because she's reminded of things. And also when she sleeps, sometimes Howl wonders what she's dreaming about, because sometimes when she sleeps, she turns back into herself. And I really think that it was a way of conveying to the viewer that this is self-imposed, because sometimes things just don't translate well, and you need that visual in a film.
Yeah, that's a really interesting. I like that idea also.
I felt like that was a thing that maybe helped the viewer understand that this is something Sophie's doing to herself, and she can stop it, and that Howl knows that this is happening.
Yeah, because, it's just like, do you think if left to her own devices because in the end, it's Calcifer that gets the spell to, like, she breaks the contract and Calcifer removes the spell. Do you think she could have figured it out herself?
No.
Also, the Witch of the Waste dies, so that might have just broken it itself, too.
Maybe. I can't remember if she dies in the movie. She has a whole other role in the movie. But I don't think so. I think that if Sophie had stayed and not just run away, I think that if she would have stayed with her family, stayed with Fanny, because Fanny tells her at the end, how could you think they're insulted? How could you think that we wouldn't know you? Like, we know you. We're your family. We love you. We would take care of you and make sure that you're comfortable. You didn't need to chase down this big, crazy castle and a bag of cheese and bread and this weird stick. You didn't need to do any of that. I don't think she would have. I think she would have just accepted that she was an old lady and just lived in a bedroom. I don't know. I don't think she would have been able to figure that out without getting out of her comfort zone, because Howl is constantly pushing her out of her comfort zone.
Yeah, he is. I mean, he pushes me out of my comfort zone. Let's be honest.
Like the kind of person that just throws a tantrum and fills their whole house with slime and threatens their very existence to kill their own fire demon. Like, I just...
Oh, and speaking of, when you got, like, we mentioned that Calcifer and Howl both want out of this contract. Well, the reason is that the Witch of the Waste got so nutty towards the end and started to just be different because of a deal that she had also made with a fire demon. And she wound up basically being taken over by the fire demon, and almost none of her actual self was left.
It is detrimentally symbiotic.
Yes.
And both Howl and Calcifer know that this is inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
The greed for magic is apparently part of having magic.
And it's like neither of them wants this. Howl does not want to be sort of eaten alive from the inside by a star. And Calcifer doesn't want to take over Howl. Like, neither of them are excited about the prospect of this, but they made the contract and they can't get out of it.
In fact, Calcifer stays.
Yeah, once he gets released.
The only thing he wants to do is like, please don't trap me here. I'll stay and I'll help you with your castle and we can be friends and all that. But please don't trap me here. I just want to be free.
Yeah, I really liked the fact that he came back because I was a little, like I said, he was my favorite character. And so to see him sort of bail all of a sudden, I was like, no. But yeah, then he came back and he's like, I'm here because I want to be. So just be cool and I'll be cool and it's fine.
At some point, Sophie and Michael go to look for, I can't remember what they went out there to the marshes to look for. But they nearly catch a shooting star and it dies instead. And Howl just becomes incensed by this. Mm-hmm. He is super angry. And Sophie like laments that the star died. And he's like, good, it should have died. Like, I cannot imagine anything worse than it not dying. But he can't say why, and so Sophie just thinks he's a dick.
Right.
But the truth is, he doesn't want Michael or Sophie or anybody else to end up the same way.
Yeah, I like all of the weird things that they can only say one thing about. Like, I don't know, I just really like the restrictions. There's something like this in the Dresden Files also with fairies, because they are not allowed to lie, but they can leave things out or word things in such a way that you have to be really, really careful.
Fairies are terrifying.
Yeah, in those books, fairies are just nothing to fuck with. No. And I like that there's a little bit of that here, except that it just has to do with magic specifically, not fairies in general. So yeah, in the end, like, this was the one thing I wasn't a big fan of was that Sophie, like, winds up with Howl in the end, which I don't see that she was, like, feeling that way about him in the rest of the whole book.
It was done better in the movie.
But, well, the movie, like, isn't that kind of most of the story is, like, a kind of shipping between the two of them?
A little bit. Like, it's not, like, overt or anything, but it's sort of an undercurrent because when Sophie goes to the palace, the lady accuses her of being in love with Howl, and she just is taken so out of herself by that accusation that she turns back into the old lady because she's suddenly insecure, and she crawls back into her little hole. And in the movie, Sophie doesn't have magic.
Yeah, I hate that.
But she has another role, and because men wrote it, the movie, the whole, like, a lot of the nuance with the female characters is utterly lost and just deleted. Sophie's role is more of a support to Howl. And like I said, he's got this whole other arc that ties into how can he defeat evil and still remain beautiful as he is, and Sophie has to convince him that he's beautiful and all this nonsense. But that's her. She saves him, of course.
Right. Yeah.
But that romance is done a little bit better. But I am a shipper, and I really do love pairs that work in fiction, but not in real life.
I kind of love that. Like, as much as I don't like the tidiness of them ending up together, like, as a rule, I do kind of like that she ended the story with that, but that was totally not the point of the story.
No.
And the whole thing is really about Sophie, and she makes Howl seem like such an idiot so much of the time.
Howl is an adult, like, all the time.
Right.
Also, I love how Letty was not paired off romantically at the end. She winds up with the wizard Suleiman, who begs her to be his apprentice, not because he's attracted to her, because he's in love with her, but because he sees her fantastic potential.
Yeah, she's super good at what she does. And he's like, oh, shit.
Yeah, her teacher even admits it earlier in the book. Like, listen, this girl I am very good at what I do, and I've taught her all I can.
Oh, my God. Her teacher, Miss Fairfax, who's, like, my favorite.
I love her. She's so great. She just wants to support Letty, and she says, this girl is beyond me. Like, I've taught her everything I know, and she's still got room for more. Like, I can't do for her
Right.
what she needs to be done. So this guy takes her on at the end. And I loved that, because now Letty gets to do exactly what she wants to do.
And Miss Fairfax is like goals for me, basically. She's like low-level witch, not like trying too much to do all this extra shit. She raises bees and is just like a plump, happy woman that makes you feel good about the world. And I just want to be her when I grow up. Thank you very much. She just makes
people happy. She's very good at her niche. She provides services. She's just got her beehives out in the country and just supporting young girls as they come into their own. Like, God.
Right.
That's
yeah.
So sweet.
Fairfax for the win. I love her.
I love it. That was probably one of my one of the sadder things that didn't turn up in the film at all was Miss Fairfax. I just think the women in this book are so great because they're all so different, and none of them blend together. Even the Witch of the Waste, which is my favorite.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that, you know, when you name the book Howl's Moving Castle, it's a great name, and I get the reason, but the book isn't about Howl. It's about all these women around Howl. And I really enjoy that surprise, because I thought going into this was going to be another male wizard story, and it's not at all. At all.
I don't think the story would have worked as well if it were told from anyone else's point of view but Sophie's.
Agreed.
Because the story is happening around Sophie, and I think that's why it feels like the pacing is weird. But it's not weird. The pacing is fine. It's just that Sophie has she's an unreliable narrator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's what makes it such a singular book. And I really think that the replay value on this book is really great. It's one of those stories you read it and you're like, oh, okay. But then you reread it and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm totally going to listen to this again. I have it on audiobook and I bought it on my Kindle, because this I feel like is going to be a fave of mine. So I'm really happy with it. It's always nice. Like, there are books that I've done for the book club that were tremendous books, but I know I'll never read them again.
Yeah. And
this book is just one that I for sure am going to come back to. Kind of like Night Circus, which was another gorgeous book. That you just want to reread it just to like feel it and experience it again. Unlike something like The Kite Runner, which was one of the most emotional books I've ever read, and really, really well done, but I never want to put myself through that again. Never, 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 never.
It's a book that you can reread and feel good about, because there are some really great elements to it.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike, I have read Imagica by Clive Barker at least 6 times, and this book is like 2,000 pages long. It's super duper long. But I read it like 6 times, and it's such a monument to male attempts at feminism and navel gazing. It's utterly ridiculous, but I've read it like 6 times, and I'm just like, I'm so glad that more people have not read this, because then I'd have to admit to liking it. But this is not like that. This is good, and it's so rare that you see fantasy of this type that's so heavily female,
mm-hmm.
And it's not about Howl.
Yeah, exactly. Yay!
That's so
Yay, ladies! Thanks, Diana Wynne Jones. Appreciate it.
Even though you make weird sound name choices. I'm going to forgive you for that, for market chipping. What is the market chipping? Like, what are the chips?
Maybe Chipping was the name of the guy who founded the market.
Or
Lord Chipping.
Maybe Market Chipping is the name of the store that the Witch of the Waste was going to start to sell the bits of dude that she didn't use.
Bits of dude.
I have a lot of
don't say that.
I have a lot of thoughts about the logistics of creating a lover. Like, what does she mean by lover? Like, is this just like, this is my lover, we are partners, but can you have sex with it? Like, what do you mean? Does this work? Did you include those parts? Like, what is the vascular system like?
That makes me think of at the end of Shaun of the Dead, when they have like the news stories of people dealing with the aftermath of the zombies, and a woman has her zombie husband on the talk show at the end. I still have the ring on my finger, Trisha. And the host of the show is like, do you go to bed with it?
I just have a lot of questions. Like, what do you have to tell it what to do the whole time? Like, what's going on here? I just have a lot of, lady, you need to give us some answers. Me personally.
You owe us. Well, thank you, ma'am, for being here today and for taking the time out to re-record with me. I really do appreciate it.
Yes.
And I think that we got a better sense of the book around this time, too, also.
I think so.
And I hope that everybody listening enjoyed listening. And I hope that you read it. If you haven't read it and you're listening without reading, do yourself a favor, because the way it's written is just charming. And I really enjoy some of the like weirder turns of phrase. And one of the quotes that I mentioned last time and forgot to bring up this time was when Sophie first comes across the castle and all of the stones and everything moving and how it looks like it's about to fall apart. And she just says, what a ridiculous way to treat a building.
He's not impressed by this.
I just love it the most.
Just thinks it's stupid. Like what kind of inefficient male nonsense is this?
Yep. Yep. She's just like, this is just ridiculous. What
a stupid way to treat a building.
So thank you, everyone. I hope that you have a lovely holiday and a very, very happy new year. And I will be letting you all know what the 2018 book list will be as soon as I have it figured out. I think I'm going to be closing those polls tonight. So the polls are up in the patrons group and on Patreon. The patrons are the ones who vote on the next books. So yeah, check that all out. If you haven't voted, make sure to do that. Although by the time this is up, it'll probably be too late. And I will see you next year. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.